Hey guys, welcome back to Jessin Reads Romance. I'm Jessin, and today I'm going to be doing my weekly wrap-up, which is technically 2 weeks worth of books read since I took like a hiatus last week. I was super busy with school and I was just like, prioritize making the videos or school. Unfortunately, school has to win. So I'm here to talk about the books that I've read in the past 2 weeks. Don't think that it's going to be a lot, just as because it's a 2-week wrap up instead of a week, because I don't have a lot of time to read at the moment. But I do have some books to go over, and they're not all going to be the J Maas that I've read. I'll like briefly skim over those things because I have like 3 hours of dedicated video to that type of thing. But anyway, the first book that I have to go over is In Between by Lynn Burke. Now this was an MMF romance and the premise is super intriguing. Overall, I gave this book 3 stars because I think that since it's a novella, it pretty much limited the amount of character growth that happened in this book in the particular way that this author told the story. So the 2 male counterparts in the MMF are the ones that are in the relationship, and they've been in a very long-term relationship. I want to say around 10 years. And one of the men is more dominant and he's less emotional about his feelings. His name's Damien, but Ethan feels like he's not getting what he needs emotionally out the relationship. He really wants like a commitment from Damien, and he says, you know, I've been hurting for a long time and it's not fair for me to be pushing down my feelings and you just getting exactly what you want out of this relationship. Like I want us to progress. I want us to be more than just people who have been kind of dating for 10 years and you can't even tell me that you love me. So I think it's best, since you're going on a business trip, I think we need to take a break. So they do take a break, and Ethan's very sad about it. He hires this new assistant in his office, and she's a woman. Her name's Shay. Now, Shay and Ethan become real good friends during the time that Damien is away, and they are on a break. Like, they're not together. They still have to figure out like how they separate their lives since they've been together for 10 years. They live together, and that hasn't been figured out. Ethan's pretty much saying he's done. Damien doesn't want to be totally done, but Damien does sleep with somebody else while he's away for work, and that wasn't like a betrayal. Not in the way that they broke up. I didn't consider it as a betrayal, but he sleeps with a woman because they're both bisexual, and Ethan starts falling for Shay. That's where the kicker is. He actually starts developing feelings for his assistant, and she starts developing feelings for him as well. And Ethan does open up to Shay, says that he was in a relationship for a long time with a man, and he was hurt by him. And he does very quickly tell Shay that he's falling for her. And I felt like this was a little fast. And then once Damien comes back home and he finds out that Ethan has pretty much moved on with Shay, he's jealous. And he's like, I don't want to lose Ethan to her. And like, who does she think she is, coming in and taking, you know, my man? And he feels like that he needs to fight for his relationship. They all end up in a relationship together. But I feel like everything that progressed was so quick that it was kind of unbelievable. I don't believe that this is an HEA between this threesome, between this polyamorous couple. Because in the same night where Ethan arranges for Shay and Damien to like meet each other and just kind of talk about where can they have a relationship 3 ways. And it turns into crazy sexy times. And I'm just like, they just really talk to each other. I don't believe that we just jump into bed after that. So it didn't quite work for me as a romance, as an erotic novel. It was okay. There was also some first time anal scenes that I'm always skeptical of. Those first time anals, I'm just like, just going straight in. Has never prepped before. Okay. What else? I don't know. Maybe some people are fine with that, but I would not be. Then of course, I read all of J Maas's books. Which I pretty much flew through once I was able to read each book. But I think I ranked them at the end of my last video, my last recap. So I'm going to do it that way. I'm going to go over them in my ranking. So my favorite book out of the J Maas, A Court of Thorns and Roses series, is A Court of Mist and Fury. It is phenomenal. I gave this book 5 stars. Everything about it worked for me. I had zero complaints. And I really loved, in all of these books, I think that Sarah J Maas really has a knack for writing these thriller kind of scenes. This almost has an element of horror. There's some scenes, like in this particular one, Farah goes to this cottage where there is this woman called the Weaver, and she can't see, so she's blind, and Farah's on a mission to get this object from this cottage without being heard by the Weaver because she can only hear. And it was a crazy scary scene, like kind of almost Hansel and Gretel-ish, like I think like Witch Who Wants to Eat Children type of vibe, but with Farah and this Weaver, and it just was so good and I loved it. And she has scenes similar to that in every single book and I really liked it. But the relationship was just top notch for me. These characters, perfection. Love them. My next favorite book is A Court of Thorns and Roses. The beginning is a little bit slow to get into the actual story because in the halfway mark we have like a tonal shift, and actually I think it's kind of smart looking back in hindsight, which is why I rated this book 4.5 stars. And I really loved it. The thrilling scenes of the second half of the book were just so good. And there were so many little breadcrumbs that happened in this book that were, you know, scattered throughout this book that I was like, oh, I see where she's going and I'm on board. I'm on board. I loved it. I loved the characters, loved Farah and Tamlin, and yeah. Then I have A Court of Wings and Ruin. I did like this book as well, but this book has a lot of like wartime stuff, lots of let's go get allies, lots of talking and chattering. So it was good relationship wise, and I love seeing all my side characters. Reese's inner circle, love just seeing potential future couples. But I also thought that there's too many twists in the end. I was like, some of them I was like, I see what you're doing. You're just kind of like making me question if this person's gonna change loyalties, but then they don't in the end. And I was just like, okay, I'm over it. And I'm over the actual battle scene because we've had a couple before this one. So it was not actually thrilling to read. These types of like actual open warfare, I don't think that Sarah J Maas is skilled at writing open warfare. But I do like how it all wrapped up in the end. It was a good ending to a series, but I would categorize this as a 4-star read. Then we have A Court of Frost and Starlight, which is just a novella. And it's kind of, doesn't really have a point to it, is the best way I can describe it. It is a cutesy winter solstice themed, kind of like Christmassy themed novella. And I kind of wish it would have stayed like that because there's some things that are introduced in this book, especially with Nesta. Nesta has a regression of character in this book that I was not really on board with. And it was to set up A Court of Silver Flames because Sarah J Maas wanted Nesta to be in a certain place for her book. And I understand that, but also, yeah. Anyway, motivations, all that type of stuff. And there was lots of secondary character drama that was just kind of like introduced in here. And there was really no fulfilling part of this book, honestly. Lots of the scenes were really boring. Maybe if it was focused more on Reese and Farah, just kind of like picking up the pieces and having a nice, like, shorter than this. It could have been shorter than this. An actual novella, I would have liked it better, but I felt like it was kind of directionless. That's how I would say. So, I don't know. 3 stars? 2.5 stars? Possibly. It just wasn't worth the whole book. Then I reread Clean Sweep by Ilona Andrews for the podcast, and guys, this world is so much fun. I think that Ilona Andrews is really skilled at, they're really skilled at building these very unique worlds that I'm just like, I really haven't read anything quite like this. And even if some of her worlds have similar type of beings, because the Innkeeper Chronicles series has werewolves and vampires, they're completely different than the werewolves and vampires of her Kate Daniels worlds. And in both instances, those types of like shifters and vampires are different than any other vampires and werewolves that I've read about. So it's just really fun to see where she goes. And I think that she does action scenes. They do action scenes very well. I'm always like, wow, this is absolutely compelling. and the humor that is balanced. I loved Dinah. She was really, really interesting as a main character. I really liked her, and also Sean Evans. We're really just kind of introduced to the hero in this book, and there's only one kiss in this book, but I think that the world is completely worth it, even though the romance, I gave it a little like snowflake for the heat level because I record steaminess on my Airtable spreadsheet. I'll show you guys. So you can see at the top it says clean sweep snowflake because it wasn't really steamy at all. But it is worth the read. I would highly suggest if you like Ilona Andrews' Hidden Legacy series, then Innkeeper Chronicles is definitely worth the read for world building and stuff, but it doesn't have the steam level that Hidden Legacy does. Hidden Legacy, even though it's not the steamiest of books that I've ever read, it's the steamiest of Ilona Andrews. Do with that information what you will. Then I read Just One More Time by Rilsey Adams. This is the third book in her Falling Like a Johnson series. I really loved the first book. It has like a very interesting premise that I'm like, how is she going to be able to wrap this up satisfactorily in a novella format? It really worked for me, and I was like, yes. The second book didn't quite work for me. This third book, again, she was like pulling out all the stops. I think that she's very skilled at writing shorter books that feel extremely emotionally satisfying. So the main characters are Katrina and Orlando. This is a second chance romance, not my favorite of tropes, but it really worked for this one. They met in college and they were like really inseparable. Katrina thought that they were one day going to get married because they kind of had that conversation like, oh, when we get married and do we want kids and stuff like that. Orlando is part of the Johnson family group. They're a very wealthy, well-to-do family in New York, and his father, he is adopted, and his adopted father is a very successful lawyer, and some of his adopted brothers work with his father, and so does he. Well, Katrina is not excited to see Orlando again. But she is a social worker, and one of her kids who his mom has just overdosed and he has no one else to turn to, but he keeps asking for this person named Juice, which turns out to be Orlando. So she has to go contact Orlando saying, you know, you're needed and come to the hospital. And this is the first time that Orlando has seen her since he broke it off with Katrina. So Jamie, who is now an orphan, is a huge part of the story. And I do want to tell people that trigger warnings for failed adoptions and loss of a parent, if you've had difficulties with being in the system, in the foster care system and stuff like that, because it definitely delves into this difficulties that Jamie himself has been through. But Orlando has a super huge attachment to Jamie. He met him through like some kind of like charity work, because since he was adopted, he kind of wanted to pay it forward and connect with kids who were struggling with home life and stuff like that. And Jamie's mom had been tapped for, you know, unsuitable behavior before. And so that's how he initially had met Jamie, and he formed a real bond with him. And so now he's like, I want to foster him and possibly adopt him, since his grandmother and his aunt are unable to take care of him. And this is something that he wants to do. But he also wants a chance at Katrina again. And Katrina does not want to give him that chance, but they keep running into each other because of Jamie, because she is assigned to this case. She chooses not to bring up that she has a history with Orlando, and that kind of comes into play later, but I think it's just a really sweet romance. I fell in love with Jamie. He was an integral part to their relationship, and I just loved his character. Slight spoilers right here. I really liked how she wrapped it up, even though it hurt me so much that Orlando and Katrina were unable to adopt Jamie in the end because his father, who had no idea that he ever existed, came into the picture. I liked that Orlando worked with his dad, his real birth dad, to say, how can I continue to be a part of Jamie's life? Because I'm attached to this kid, and like, I want to be a part of his life. Like, I want to set aside a college fund for him as well. And he ends up by getting like visitation that a parent would get. He gets like every other weekends with Jamie. Isn't that amazing? It was just like, I wanted them to adopt Jamie, but then his father came into the picture, and he was a really nice guy, and he had a family, he had a wife, and he had a little girl. And Jamie was satisfied in the end with having this extended family. And it was just so freaking beautiful. I loved it. So 5 stars to this one. I can't wait for the next one. I love this series. I love this series. Then I read Make Me Yours by Melanie Harlow. I'm giving Melanie Harlow a second chance whenever I read this book, because the book that I read, I think it was called Irresistible initially. I really disliked that book. It just did not do it for me at all. I was not in love with the characters. So I have a 3-strike policy with authors. If I don't like the first book that I ever read by them, I'm not going to call it quits unless it's like crazy, like I have a lot of really big reasons why I don't like them. Normally I'll give them a couple other shots, because there have been books by my favorite authors that I didn't like, and what if I read that first book and then gave up on them and then never discovered some of my favorite books? So I always give authors 3 tries, 3 different books to kind of convince me to continue on reading their backlist. So I decided to try another of Melanie Harlow's, and I decided to read Make Me Yours. Make Me Yours is a neighbor romance, and it's very interesting. So the hero, Cole, he got married young and he had a baby young, but his wife died in childbirth, and so he's been living with his mom ever since, because he is a cop, and so his hours, he really needed somebody to stay home with his daughter at very like weird hours. And then his neighbor, Cheyenne, has just recently moved back with her mother to save up money. She is a teacher, and she's always had a crush on Cole because her older brother is his best friend. So it's a brother's best friend romance as well. And these two just kind of like fall into a romance. Cheyenne is very good with Cole's daughter. She sometimes babysits, and just kind of like hanging and like commiserating, like we both want to move out of our parents' house and stuff like that, but you know, reasons, and they kind of commiserate with their like crazy moms who are overly involved with their lives, and they just kind of fall into dating. Cole, interestingly enough, is very worried about dating someone because his daughter has brought up in the past, whenever she was like 3, saying like, I don't want you to get married and like forget about me and stuff like that. And so he kind of made a promise to his very young child that he would never get married. But now that is she 9? I think she's 9. He expects that she would have a very adverse reaction to her dating, but she takes the news that he's dating Cheyenne very well, but he thinks that she's hiding something, that something must be wrong. And it's actually a reflection of like his post-traumatic stress disorder from losing his wife, and it's something that he has to deal with. So I find that very interesting. I like the way that this all played out, and I really enjoyed this romance. So 4 stars for this one. I'll probably be reading some more by Melanie Harlow because I thought that this was a really cute romance. Then I read Born Darkly by Trisha Wolfe. This is a duet, the Darkly Madly duet, and the heroine, London, is a psychiatrist, and she's kind of made a name for herself because she's notorious for not getting criminals off, but saving criminals from death penalty type of situations because of their mental health issues that she claims that she has sat with these guys and they have serious disorders that has influenced them in whatever crime that they have committed. And she is about to be up. She has like a contract where she has to work with the prison system for like a year more, and she gets an assignment that she needs to take on 2 more clients, and she's like, I'm only going to take on 1 more. She takes on this murderer, Grayson, and I forgot what his nickname was. It's not the Angel of Mercy or something, but the Angel of something. And we find out later that Grayson pretty much only kills, kind of like Dexter, bad people. So it kind of, I don't want to say lessens the amount of forbiddenness, but sort of it kind of does for me. I mean, if we can love a show like Dexter and root for the main character Dexter, then it's really not a hard parallel to draw that we'd be able to root for Grayson as a character. So the problem with this book is that I was expecting Harley Quinn and Joker vibes, and I was really interested in like the how are they going to fall in love? How is this going to happen in their sessions? How is a doctor going to go from being very professional to having feelings that are completely unprofessional with a convicted murderer? So that's the vibes that I really wanted, was like Harley Quinn Joker kind of vibes. And it just wasn't giving it to me because the romance just fell extremely flat. Some interesting things happen toward the end, but not interesting to me. I wasn't interested in like the goriness of what happened. Also, lots of past things from their lives, from their childhood come up, and I don't love the direction that we're going with London. I really don't. So I don't know what I really wanted. I can't like express what I wanted from this book. So 3 stars. Then I read The Italian by T.L. Swan. So I have come to not an interesting conclusion, but I've come to a conclusion about T.L. Swan because the first books that I read by her were The Stopover and The Takeover, and those are the only books that she has published traditionally with Montlake. And the rest of her books are indie published, and she has just written them, and she does have an editor because she does thank an editor. But whatever editor that she has for Montlake can direct and focus her writing in a way that makes these books amazing. Where like The Italian has a good story and it has a really good base, but I think that a lot of this could have benefited from like another type of editor. Whatever editing that was done for this book, I wanted more. I needed more direction with the plot, the pacing, and also character development in this book. So let me tell you a little bit about the actual book and not her process, and why I'm only going to be reading her books that she publishes with Montlake from now on and not her backlist. Well, I still have Our Way. I did buy Our Way, and the premise is so good and I want it, but I'm just afraid that it's going to be another Italian, and these books are pretty darn thick. So The Italian is about this girl named Olivia, and she's from Australia, and T.L. Swan is an Australian author. She goes to Italy, and she goes for a month-long vacation. Half of it is she's by herself, and then she plans on meeting up with her friend when they go to the Amalfi Coast. But while she's in Rome, she is at a restaurant eating, and she catches eyes with this guy, and he's really hot, and he ends up by approaching her. He's being very forward and being like, hey, were you looking for me, or like you need some help? You're not Italian, I'll help you with the menu. They end up by spending like a whirlwind weekend together. They have an intense connection, intense sexual connection. His name is Enrico, and she learns that he is a cop. And so he is just kind of like, when are you coming back? Are you going to come back after you meet your friend? And she's like, yeah, I do plan on coming back. And he's like, when you get back, you're going to stay with me and we're going to hang out together some more, because they literally spent like her entire week in Rome and that weekend all together. So he drops her off at the airport. But the second he drops her off, he gets this call that his grandfather and his father were in a car accident and that they're in critical condition. He needs to go to the hospital. At the hospital, he finds out that this part of his life was hidden from him this entire time. His grandfather was a mafia boss, and now since his father also died, that makes him the new mafia boss, and he is fighting against it because he's like, I'm a cop. Now, there's some plot holes because as a cop, wouldn't he have heard about his own mafia family? Because it's literally the Ferrara crime family, and that's his family. So like, why did he not hear about his own crime family the entire time he was on the police force? There was kind of a mention of it and being like, it was just kept from me, but it just doesn't make sense. Just does not make sense. But when she goes back to Rome, and he's changed a lot. It's only been like 2 weeks, but he's been ignoring her while he's dealing with the fallout from his losing a beloved father and also his grandfather, and all of a sudden becoming aware of this whole world that he was unaware of. It's a lot to handle. Plus, when she comes back, the authorities tap her for having cocaine in her bag. She's like, that's not mine. This is a plot thread that is never resolved. Who put that in her bag? We don't know. We never find out. Anyway, he's very rude to her and dismissive and just being like, you need to go home. Bye. We're over. So she goes back brokenhearted, being like, what an asshole. 2 years later, she goes back to Italy, unbeknownst to her that Enrico has gotten her a job because she works in fashion at Valentino. And so now he basically has moved her to Milan and she doesn't know. And he wants to orchestrate it to where they just kind of run into each other and they reconnect. But he sees her already on a date with somebody else and he kind of freaks out. So this kind of sets the tone for their relationship, where it's a lot of hot and cold. Lots of, I'm not going to tell you this information and let's fight about it and then let's make up. And that's what happens a lot in this book. Not a whole ton of direction, and I found Olivia to be very TSTL. There's one thing that T.L. Swan does, and it happens in the stopover, and I didn't like it when I read it in the stopover, but I like the rest of the book. That's one of those things that I just kind of like overlooked. I'm like, that's fine, that's something that I didn't like, but it doesn't matter because I like the rest of the book. Happens again in this book. I don't understand characters who move to a place or get a job, like in the stopover, because the heroine gets a new job and she moves to New York. On her first day, she meets like her coworkers who work side by side with her and proceeds to tell her entire life story to them, all of her business. Like in the stopover, she's like, I'm sleeping with the CEO of this company. Why would you tell complete strangers this? What if they're jealous? What if they get you fired? What if they sabotage you? But of course, it turns out it's fine. They never tell on her and they're all like, oh my God, we just want to have the juicy details. Happens again in this. She meets people that she proceeds to just like randomly befriend. It has slight consequences in this one, but I'm just like, why are you so dumb? By this point, she knows he's mafia and she just like, oh yeah, we met years ago, and like telling her life story. And I'm just like, stop it. Anyway, I didn't really enjoy this book. 3 stars, possibly even 2.5, just because I'm annoyed that it was so long and I had to spend so much time with these characters with it not really going very many places. So then I read A Court of Silver Flames. I am going to be doing a dedicated sit-down video to talk about certain scenes in this book, but this is the love story of Nesta and Cassian, and I can tell you that Nesta frustrated me a lot in the first part of this novel. I empathized with her. I understood the struggles that she was going through. We have such differing personalities where Nesta is she lashes out at a lot of people, and though I understand her motivations, it's hard for me to let those things slide with the amount of times that they happen, because I empathize with the people that she's hurting. We love the people that she's hurting, and so it's hard to see her hurting our characters that we love, especially Cassian. And I feel like I was at the 80% mark because I was reading this on ebook because this took so long to get here. So I was like, screw it, I'm gonna read it on ebook. But I think I checked and it was like 82%, and she lashed out again, and I'm just like, this book is huge. Where is my character progression? She has had so many epiphany moments where she's just like, I hate that I'm like this. We'll start changing, and I want to see this change on the page, and I don't want it to be in the very last chapter, in the very last conflict. So yeah, I would rate this book 3.5 stars. Yep, 3.5 stars. I want to say 4 star. I'm going to round it up to 4 stars when I put Goodreads, but I had quite a few issues with why is this book so long and some scenes. So I'll talk about that in my vlog. Not my vlog. I'm just sitting down and reviewing it. It's not a vlog. I reread White Lilies by Samantha Christie for the podcast. Now this book is forbidden romance between a surrogate and a married man. There is no cheating in this book, but it's still a hard sell for a lot of people, and also trigger warning for cancer and the death of a loved one. So yeah, this book is phenomenal though, guys. I give this book 4.5 stars. It was just as good as I remember it being. I love talking about it with Juliet. The characters are just so well written, and the heroine Skylar, the reason why she wants to become a surrogate, I was just like, interesting. I like this, because she was not happy with the direction her life was taking her. She was sleeping around, she was drinking a lot, and she was like, I want to do something to change my life. Her friend jokingly brings up surrogacy, and then she's like, yeah, let's do that. And her friend actually knows somebody who she was diagnosed with cancer whenever she was 18, and then none of her eggs are viable, so she can't do it. So this is even more forbidden because Skylar is basically gonna have to give her own baby up for adoption. So it's Skylar's egg and it's Griffin's sperm. And the wife, Erin, the one who had cancer and can't have kids, she is beautiful. I love her character so much. Skylar and Erin become like best friends. And the way that this plays out, you just have to read about it. It's like hard to explain. I think Samantha Christie does it so well. I would just give this book a shot. I don't think everyone's gonna like this book. There's just some things that I think that people were just like, it's unbelievable to me. But for me, it completely worked. I loved it. I loved Griffin. I loved Erin. I loved the whole dynamic between all 3 of them. It was just so much fun to read again. Then I finally finished A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair. I've been listening to this book on audiobook for a while, and it's one of those instances where I would listen to 15 minutes and be like, bored, I'm gonna put it down. A lot of the issues that I had with this is that it shares some similarities with Lore Olympus. I'm not saying that she copied Lore Olympus, but it does share some similarities where when these similar scenes come up, I can't help but compare it to Lore Olympus, which is a Hades and Persephone story that I love, like really love. So they both have urban fantasy elements. This is actually set in like the human world and gods are there, but Persephone has disguised herself and she's going to college. In Lore Olympus, the Olympians, their realms are actually modern day, high tech, and the mortal realms are like ancient Greece. It's very interesting. I really like it. And in that one, Persephone is also going to college. And in both instances, Demeter is kind of hiding aspects of Persephone's abilities. There's similar scenes with meeting Hades at a club. There's similar scenes with Persephone getting drugged at a club. Adonis is Apollo from Lore Olympus. So every time these scenes cropped up, I was just kind of like, I feel like Rachel did it better. I can't help but draw comparisons and be like, this just falls flat to me. I didn't love the character of Hades, and I didn't connect with the character of Persephone because I feel like she was just kind of like very whiny and kind of always looking for a reason why Hades was the bad guy, even though she was presented with evidence that he was actually good. But she kept on insisting like, oh, he's just not good enough. And it bothered me. It bothered me because we know that she's seeing what she wants to see and not what's actually there. She's not looking deeper. I just found that she was quite immature and a little bit righteous, which she had lots of righteous indignation coming through, which I was just not a fan of. So I wasn't satisfied with their romance when they did get together because I was just kind of like, I don't like this version of Persephone. So it's hard. It's hard when you like the premise of a story, Hades and Persephone, just their romance, and it's hard when you have found something like Lore Olympus that really does it for you because it's such a specific type of story that is being told. So yeah. Anyway, that's all I have for this weekly wrap up. I'm gonna try to be more consistent, but I'm not making any promises because like I said, school priority. But I do have some exciting videos that are coming up that will be posted. One of them will be coming on Monday. So it'll be really exciting, guys. And I'm just so glad to sit back down and talk about books because I really did miss this. Even though it's only been like a week, I did miss talking about books, sitting down talking about books. So if you like this video, give it a big thumbs up. And if you're not already subscribed to my channel, make sure that you subscribe to get notified on any future videos that I do. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, life's better with little HEA. Bye, guys.